we have over 30 different antidepressants now. It turns out that back in 1950s is when we sort of discovered the first antidepressants, some of which we discovered because it turned out that, some of these treatments, for instance, for tuberculosis, had these sort of MAO effects. And so people who are being treated for tuberculosis and their moods perked up, and people said, wait a minute, let's look at that. And so we had a lot of these more sort of aggressive treatments like MAO inhibitors. You can't take those and have red wine or processed aged meats like pepperoni and stuff. So we tend to not use those as frontline agents. But starting in the end of 1980s and going into 90s and all the way up to now, we've got a whole host of these serotonin selective. So MAO means it's monoamine oxidase, which means it's the enzyme that breaks down norepinephrine, serotonin, and dopamine. And those are the three big neurotransmitters that are involved in the treatment of depression. And so it's very non-selective. It just hits all of them, as opposed to these SSRIs where it's just serotonin. They don't mess with norepinephrine. They don't mess with dopamine. And so that's why many of these have far fewer side effects. Some, however, though, sometimes you want that combination because it just turns out, for example, that an SNRI like desvenlafaxine, which is Effexor, or duloxetine, which is Cymbalta. So just taking Cymbalta as an example, Cymbalta is an indication not just for depression and anxiety. So it turns out serotonin is involved in anxiety as well, but also neuropathic pain. So that's nerve pain that you can get, migraines and diabetic neuropathy and these kinds of things, as well as musculoskeletal pain. So combining serotonin and norepinephrine has some added benefits, even though it increases the number of side effects. So these are, sort of first line. Then there's the older medicines like the tricyclic antidepressants, and some of the newer antidepressants that have just come online and about which we don't have nearly as much experience. And then these third line up to and including now, there's a clinic at Hopkins where low dose of ketamine is being used for that 30% of people who even after 4 different treatments won't respond. So the good news is that you can combine these. Many of these go well together. So for instance, bupropion is just a norepinephrine selective, norepinephrine and dopamine, that's Wellbutrin. And you can combine that with any of the SSRIs. So they can, and in fact, the Wellbutrin can counteract some of the side effects. So we have 30 here listed, over 30, but you have, if you begin to do the math, we have easily 90 combinations of these different things. So if you say, oh, I tried it and it didn't work, and you've tried one, chances are that that you haven't been through it. So what do we do when we sort of think about how to work with patients on identifying what the best antidepressants are? So I think that these are important things to consider. The first thing is, to me, the most important thing is this a person who that there's a treatment that's going to work? And, they say the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior in terms of the stock market and all of that. But certainly, if someone has been on an antidepressant before and it worked, then that's where you probably want to start, because any given antidepressant has, maybe a 50-60% chance of giving a response. And, as far as putting someone into remission, it's probably more like 30 or 40%. So if something's put someone into remission or been very good, then that's the one you want to go with. The second best predictor, if the person has never been treated, is a lot of times these things run in families, whether it's, an autoimmune disease that runs in family or depression. So even though people don't talk about it, they often know, oh yeah, Aunt Susie was on some medication. Call Aunt Susie and find out from Aunt Susie what she was taking. Because if Aunt Susie went through the trouble to realize, oh, this medication gave me terrible side effects, you don't want to be on that. This medicine really worked. That's the one you want to start with if you don't have your own personal experience. Then there's patient preference, meaning that some medicines, for instance, are more likely to have potential weight gain, and some are, more likely to promote sleep, and some are more likely to, have a 10-20% chance of causing sexual dysfunction. So a lot depends on, that still means you got 80 to 90% chance that you won't get that side effect, but you need to, hopefully you need to be thinking and working with your doctor on saying, what's your priorities? I know that when I have put weight on women, they often want to kill me as a result of that. So I tend to be very selective about not using medicines that are known to stimulate appetites in women. And it's not like the men enjoy it, but it's certainly something just to be aware of, that people have their individual preferences. There are also co-occurring conditions. So as I said, serotonin is involved not just in depression, but anxiety and PTSD and obsessive compulsive disorder. So, these are things that or neuropathic pain. So you want to take these things into account. Tricyclic antidepressants are great treatments for migraine headaches. So if you have someone who's depressed and has migraine, that's something you might want to think about. So these are things that, these co-occurring things, you have to be careful if you're on certain medicines. Some medicines tend to have what are called drug-drug interactions. So, being on Prozac is a 2D6 inhibitor, which happens to be where a lot of benzodiazepines like Valium and the like are metabolized. So if you put someone on, on Prozac and they're already taking Valium, chances are the levels are going to shoot up in their system, and you'd want to know that ahead of time. Doesn't mean you can't combine them, but you have to start low and go very slow. Speaking of which, there are some treatments like Effexor that has a very short half-life, and if you stop it because you go away over the weekend and you don't have it for 3 or 4 days, that's more likely to cause some withdrawal symptoms. In this case, that's just a worsening anxiety and sometimes shock-like sensations or flu-like sensations. Prozac, on the other hand, has a 1-week half-life. So if you miss a dose, then, or even a couple of doses, when you get back on it, you will not have had a significant impact. And then, of course, sadly, there's cost. I use for myself and my patients goodrx.com. Be aware that out there, if you go to GoodRx, GODRX.com, a lot of times you can get a coupon from that website that makes it cheaper for you to get your medicine than your insurance plan will charge you to get the same medicine. Certainly for many medicines that are still expensive but have been around for a while, you can get 90% reductions in the cost by using these opportunities.